Hey everybody, this is Candace of the Loving You Lifestyle, and welcome back to my channel, another video. I want to go ahead and tell you all to go ahead and hit the subscribe button and to like this video. Tonight, I am here with a very, very special guest of mine. I'm very, very excited about this guest and conversation. I have with us Jeff Landers, who is best-selling author. He is best known for his books, Divorce, Think Financially, Not Emotionally, and that's volume 1 and 2. And then my personal favorites is How to Protect Your Financial Well-Being as a Stay-at-Home Mom. So I'm here with Jeff, and tonight we are going to be breaking down the Jeff and MacKenzie Bezos divorce. And I am very excited about this conversation. And the reason why I want to have this conversation with you, Jeff, is because I had in my private circles, I had a woman who made the comment about, I'm sorry. She made the comment about how there was, she felt sorry for MacKenzie Bezos because she, she's like, how did she didn't secure her position, and who is she going to marry now? And I would hate to be with a man that I helped build all that with. And then, I kind of brought it to her attention. I'm like, do you understand that MacKenzie Bezos is like the 25th richest person on the planet because of her divorce settlement? I think that she did
I
something
think she's
right.
way more than that. I think
I'm
she's
sorry.
way more than that, Candace. I said, I think she's way more than the 25th richest.
Are you serious?
No, I think she's the third richest woman in the world, and she's way up there. I mean, I think she got 25% of what Jeff Bezos had. I think it was originally 30 billion with a B dollars, and because the stock went up tremendously over the last 2 years, I think she moved up to 60 or 70 billion. And she's already given away, she's a total philanthropist. She's already given away 10 to 20 billion dollars. Her goal is pretty much to give away everything.
Yes. I saw that where she had given immediately after her divorce settlement that she gave away like $6 billion or something like that to charity. Which I'm not surprised.
Exactly.
Which I'm not surprised at her at all for doing that, because when you kind of look at her background and who she is, and even being like a mother of 4, one of her children is adopted from Asia, and she's always been like this big-hearted, kind-hearted woman that wants to do a lot of good in the world.
Right. And how many billions of dollars do you need to live? How many houses do you need? How many jets do you, you could buy a nice jet for 30 or 40 million, dollars, and we're talking about, something 1,000 times that. So you only can live in one house at a time and drive one car at a time. So, if she kept $1 billion for herself, she's still a young woman, so let's say she lives another 50 years. If she kept $1 billion, she could probably live off of the interest very, very nicely and never have to worry about money, and pretty much give everything else away and be more than fine.
Absolutely. She has enough money for like several generations.
Yeah, several lifetimes is it?
Right, exactly.
is absolutely right.
And I want to kind of give people the backdrop, because I think that their backdrop is very interesting. And one of the things that I talk about, Jeff, on my channel are things about, women just doing their best, being their best, understanding how to position themselves to just have excellent lives. And I think that Jeff Bezos and MacKenzie Bezos' story is really interesting and can kind of set the backdrop for our conversation. So, right now, Jeff Bezos' net worth is like $182 billion. And I think he's projected to be the world's first trillionaire within the next like 5 or 6 years.
Could be. Could be. Today, actually, I heard Elon Musk passed him as the richest man in the world with 188 billion. So poor Jeff fell to second place.
Wow, poor Jeff. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, my
Um,
heart bleeds for him.
I know. And I think when they met, Jeff Bezos was actually um, vice president of, I want to say, a hedge fund, and
Exactly.
he,
Yes.
yeah, and he met McKenzie on the job. So
Mm,
she had actually interviewed for a position, and he hired her. So they were engaged within 3 months of dating, married within 6 months of meeting, and this was before Amazon even got
right.
started in 1994. So I think that that's interesting to know that, they were both Princeton graduates. They both graduated from Princeton, um, met 2 years before Amazon got started. And Jeff was already vice president, and she was just kind of like the research assistant, whatever that means.
Right. Right.
And, and in 1999, they rented a one-bedroom house in Seattle. So, they had, Jeff Bezos had come up with the great ideal of Amazon. He was looking for investors,
Right.
and they
And he
decided
built,
to move.
and he built his own desk. He used a door as the top of the desk, and I think he put it on two A-frames,
Are you
working out
serious?
of the garage or something. So I mean, they were very frugal, and they literally had nothing. Or I mean, I'm sure he was making a good salary or
Right.
whatever at the hedge fund, but he had his idea, and he gave up what was probably, for most people, would have been a very lucrative career at the hedge fund.
Exactly. I mean, and they lived, like you said, they lived a very frugal lifestyle for several years until Amazon was able to get off of the ground. And that's one of the reasons why they were able to do so well. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, now they own like 5 homes. They probably own more than five at this point. But my question to you is, I'm going to they met. Do you think that they had a prenup when they got married?
Probably not. I mean,
Or do you know if
most
they had
people.
a
Yeah, most people, when they're younger, they sort of shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, I don't have that much. What do I need a prenup for?" And why do I want to throw cold water on the situation? So I think a lot of people, especially if they're still in their 20s, I mean, sometimes people are getting married later and later.
Right.
And so, if you're in your 30s and maybe you already own your own home as a single person, and maybe you have, a decent 401k or IRA, or maybe you had even started your own business, you might want a prenup to protect that. But, most people, in their 20s, the only thing they probably have is a student loan. and,
Right.
and not much. So the thought is, well, what do we need a prenup for? There's really nothing to protect. We don't have anything. And what's interesting, in the Bezos case, is that everything, for the most part, that Jeff Bezos acquired, all those billions of dollars, happened during the term of the marriage. So it was
Right.
all marital property. It's
Right.
not like she married him, or and like it'll be a different story if Jeff remarries. I guarantee you there'll be an iron-proof prenup.
I'm sure. And he is engaged. At least that's what I heard. He's currently engaged now.
With the woman he was cheating on Mackenzie with.
Right. Right.
Exactly. Well, and it just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how rich you are or whatever. I mean, people are still going to have extramarital affairs, whether they have no money in the bank or they have almost $200 billion. human nature is often human nature, and your bank account doesn't dictate what you do.
Absolutely, absolutely doesn't. Do you think at some point though, when they both realize like, you know what, Amazon is doing extremely well, do you think that they could have possibly done a post-nuptial agreement and this is the reason why their divorce settlement went relatively smoothly? Because it seemed like it was pretty quick.
It was, and I think they didn't want to do anything. I mean, they both had a vested interest in Amazon, and
Right.
they didn't want to do. Excuse me, I'm sorry. They didn't
No
want to
problem.
do anything that was going to negatively affect the company or the management
Yeah.
of the company, or for her to try to assert rights, saying she wanted a board seat or things of that nature.
Right.
I don't think she really. I mean, from what I read, I mean, I know as much as you do. Jeff or MacKenzie don't typically call me and let me know what's going on, but yeah, I think it was amicable because neither one of them was worried about their survival or whatever. It was
Right.
just where was the decimal point going to be in the settlement? I mean, in many ways, this is not real life when you have a married couple and they're fighting over the house, and maybe that's their only asset. And we could talk about my new business related to that later. But oftentimes, you have a few dollars in the bank, maybe you have a 401k or an IRA, and you have a house, and in many cases, it's still mortgaged up to the hilt, and you don't have that luxury of what Jeff and MacKenzie did, or you even talk about celebrities. What's the name? Kardashian. And her husband. Rumors are that Kim is filing for divorce, and that
Oh,
the two of them, are worth like $2 billion. Again, money's not a real issue. They're both going to be more than fine.
right.
So and again, they both had. I don't know if they have a prenup or a postnup, but they both had substantial assets before they even got married.
Right. Let me ask you a question because this is something I'm very curious about. Does every state have like a marital community property law? So, like, once you get married, everything or what all assets collected during the term of the marriage are considered marital or community property and thus divided? Or how does that normally work?
So every one of the 50 states has their own laws related to divorce.
Okay.
There are about 11 community property states, which basically makes the assumption that everything is 50-50, and community property states are like California and Texas. The vast majority, pretty much everything east of the Mississippi, are what's known as equitable distribution states, which
Okay.
basically means that whatever was acquired during the marriage gets divided equitably, but not necessarily equally. Um,
Ah,
and that's the big difference. So, let's say you were married for only 2 years or whatever, and you're a spouse and you didn't really contribute much. I mean, a judge could say, you know what? It was a very, very short marriage, and you're not entitled to 50%. Maybe you're entitled to 35%. I mean,
okay.
you just never know. But the presumption in the community property states is that everything's 50-50, including debt. And that could be a big negative, because let's say you were married and your husband had a mistress, and he racked up $100,000 in gifts to her, even though you knew nothing about it, and even though your name might not even be on the credit card, that debt could be 50% yours. Whereas in the equitable distribution states, that's not necessarily true. The first question you ask is, one, whose name is on the account? Is it joint? Did you have anything to do with it? And if the charges on that credit card, was it for the well-being of the family? Like, okay, did you buy groceries with that? That's a legitimate expense. But if the husband or the wife, went out and bought gifts for their paramour, that just might be the debt of the person that incurred those debts. So it cuts both ways. When you talk about community property states, you could get stuck with 50% of the debt that you knew nothing about and had, never authorized and had no knowledge of. So that it's nice to talk about, the assets, but, people forget that there's also debt and liabilities.
Wow, that's amazing. That is something to think about, especially I think nowadays. When you said that, I kind of chuckled to myself because, of course, being a sugar baby is all the rage right now.
Right.
But if you're the wife on the end, you could be stuck. You could be stuck paying the debt for the sugar baby's gifts on your tab.
Well, that's exactly right. So, I mean, that's always a problem. Now, in the cases that I've worked on, and you go through, the credit card bills, and you see those things that, let's say, are attributable, to the sugar baby. Well, the wife shouldn't be paying. Half that money is hers. She shouldn't be paying for the sugar baby. So basically, we make a list of, all the money that he spent and said, okay, 50%, it's got to go back to the soon to be ex-wife.
Wow.
Assuming, assuming that there's enough assets to do that. It depends on each case. I mean, he might have racked up, $20,000 in gifts to his sugar baby, but maybe he doesn't have a penny in the bank. Then how do you reimburse her? I mean, there are ways to do it. If the house is being sold, that could come off of his share. I mean, there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, assuming that, there are other assets around.
Well, let me ask you this, going back to Jeff and MacKenzie Bezos. So obviously we don't know for sure, but I would presume that at some point they may have had a post-nuptial agreement. And so for those of you who don't understand post-nuptial agreement, because we really don't talk about that a lot.
Right.
A post-nuptial agreement is basically an agreement made after you are married.
Correct.
And how do you even approach that subject? Like, I know for me, that would be a conversation that would feel a little bit uncomfortable. How do you advise women to jump into that conversation of having a postnuptial agreement?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. First of all, you have to understand a couple of things. One, not every state recognizes postnuptial agreements.
Okay,
And
wow.
two, there's a higher bar for enforcing postnuptial agreements. And the reason is with the prenup, this happens before you get married. Okay, if you don't like the terms of the prenup, you can just kind of walk away and say, okay, we're not going to get married, case closed. Okay, right. In the case when you're already married, the law presumes that you have the fiduciary responsibility to each other. So when you do a prenup, a postnup, basically you're being asked to give something up, and what are you getting in return? So the bar is much higher. Of course, it takes both parties to agree. I mean, if you don't want to sign a postnup, you don't sign it. And then, either you continue with the marriage, or the other person says, if you don't sign it, we're getting divorced. I mean, that could be the case. There's some legitimate circumstances for doing a postnup. Okay, let's say you're the wife and you have a very lucrative job. You're working for Goldman Sachs and you're making $200,000 a year or whatever it is. I mean, depends what your circumstance is, and it doesn't matter where you put the decimal point. But if you have what you think is a lucrative job, and let's say, you're talking to your husband and you're deciding to have a family, And as part of that, you both sort of agree that, she should give up her job and stay home with the baby.
Right.
Okay, what would be legitimate in that case is create a postnup, because now, she's going to spend the next perhaps 10 years of her life staying at home. She's never going to get back. She's out of the workforce.
Right.
Technology has changed during that time. She's
Right.
never going to get back, most likely, into that similar position. So then you could create a postnup saying, in return for me agreeing to stay home and be with the baby, if we get divorced, I want X additional dollars because I gave up a very lucrative career.
Right.
Okay,
And that's more
or
than fair and understandable.
yeah, or let's say after the term of the marriage, one party starts a very lucrative business. Theoretically, again, and like you said, it's a hard conversation. How do you turn to your spouse and say, "Look, I'm doing something great. I don't want you to share in all of this if something goes wrong. So I only want you to have a smaller percentage." I mean, you could imagine you'd want to be a fly on the wall listening to that conversation, right?
Right.
The other time, sometimes that's done is let's say, there's some sort of infidelity, and okay, you're going to forgive your spouse that was unfaithful, but in return, to stay married, you want a postnup that, if he does it again, okay, or she does it again, then, you're going to get 60% instead of whatever, or you're going to get an extra 50,000 or whatever. Celebrities do that a lot. It's not recognized in every state. Some lawyers call them, bad boy provisions or whatever. That, okay, you really screwed up. I forgive you and I'm going to take you back, but you do it again and it's going to cost you 100,000. And the third time
Right.
you do it, we're getting divorced and I'm getting 70% of everything.
Bad boy permission. I like that. So
So
let's say for instance, in the case of Jeff and MacKenzie, let's say for instance, MacKenzie met Jeff while he was very successful, like the mistress has.
right.
What do you suggest as terms of the prenup in that situation? Because I know some women, they've felt like, I've heard some women talk very negatively about prenups, but I always say, like, it's really based on what you agree on. But what are some terms that you like in that case that you think could be done to kind of create a bit of
I've
security?
I've seen so many different things. I mean, something that's very popular, I mean, I've seen it a lot. I don't like it because it's almost like, you're paying for a prostitute. It sort of rubs me the wrong way. But many of them will say, "Look, I'll give you $100,000 for every year that we're married." Okay, so after year one, if we divorce, you get 100,000. If we divorce after 2 years, you get 200,000. So it's almost like you're paying her to be your wife. I mean, it really, to me, it's a little off-putting. But I've seen it many, many times. Sometimes they have what's called a sunset provision that, okay, after we're married for 15 years, the prenup disappears as if it never existed, because if we're together for 15 years, then, you've earned your dues and
Right.
you're entitled to whatever you're entitled to. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that very often, that, there's a payment for every year of marriage. I mean, to me, that's, what do you think about that? I think it's a little off-putting. It just seems
I
like
mean,
you're paying for her services.
I can see that point of view. I think it's just difficult if you're coming into a situation where the man is already much more financially established than you are, and maybe he is expecting certain things. You want to make sure, and you're going to jump in there and you already decided like, okay, well, I'm going to be this type of wife, or I'm going to have to leave a certain, maybe a certain career, or maybe being with him provides a certain, or comes with a certain amount of social pressure that you have to endure, then I mean, maybe that would be cause. I don't know what dollar amount would go on that
Well, it
though.
doesn't have to be a dollar amount. I mean, I've seen among, ordinary couples where they say, okay, depending which spouse owns the business, and we're always talking about the man, having the assets, but I've worked on many cases where, the woman is the bigger income earner, or has the assets because of a business or whatever. But under the law, at least theoretically, it's supposed to be gender neutral, as are prenups and postnups. But instead of saying, okay, I'm going to pay you a certain amount for every year, you could say, okay, let's say there's a case of a business, or even wealth. Let's say, okay, on the day that we get married, your net worth is $5 million. Okay, but anything above $5 million after that it has been earned or acquired during the term of the marriage, now is joint property. And should we ever get divorced, then we'll split anything over and above that. And that's really, even without a prenup, I mean, that's pretty much the law everywhere, is when you look at your premarital assets. I mean, if you have, $100,000 in your 401k when you get married, and you get divorced, and there's 200,000, you don't get half of that 200,000 in most cases. You'll get half of the 100,000 that the increase, since you got married. The original 100,000 was his or her premarital property. So, you could always, I guess, put that in writing, to make sure that there's no misconceptions as to, let's say, what the starting point is, as opposed to just saying, in essence, I'm paying you $100,000 a year to be my spouse.
Right. And let me ask you this question, because I think finances are the number one cause for divorce anyways. I mean, would you confirm that? Is that,
Yeah,
you
I think.
that's true?
Yeah, I don't know if it's number one, but money issues are, for most people. Okay, let's talk the average. Obviously, that wasn't the case with Jeff and MacKenzie, and with many celebrities.
Right.
They just got bored of each other, or one or both of them had an extramarital affair, or there's a drug problem, or there's an alcohol problem. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that, but financial, I don't even want to say difficulty, let's say financial issues could be a problem. I mean, you could have one spouse that's a saver and very frugal, and the other spouse that's going out and, buying expensive golf equipment, and, has all different hobbies, and, they're spending, a fortune on that. Or, the woman is a, compulsive shopper, and she's spending thousands of dollars in the mall every month.
Right.
I think all of those are certainly issues, and certainly addictions, and abuse of all forms are big issues as well. But money is certainly up there. No question about that.
Absolutely. And what about in the case that, the opposite is true? I mean, I know you said you have a few cases where maybe the woman maybe makes more, or maybe both couples are successful at the start of the marriage. I know I have heard of some couples just saying, okay, whatever we came into the marriage with, if we split, that is ours. And then anything that we establish together, we then we'll split 50-50.
Well, yeah, I mean that could work, and again, in many cases, that is the presumption under the law that everything that you had prior to marriage is your premarital property. Is it smart to put it in writing and specify? My 401k as of the date of the marriage had $102,378.62 in it. Yeah, probably.
Right.
So there's no question 10, 15 years later, when you can't even get those records anymore. So, does that make sense? But again, it really depends how much we're talking about. I mean, someone that has an IRA for, $6,000 and, minimal assets and whatever, and a 10-year-old car, I mean, are you going to spend the money bothering with the prenup if you don't have that much? Or if you have credit card debt or whatever, forget about having no assets. What if you have a negative net worth? And many people in their 20s do, coming out of college, they've got student loans or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of people that are starting off. Maybe they went to law school, maybe they went to medical school, maybe they got a master's degree or whatever. They come out with $100,000 in debt and have nothing else. So they really have a negative net worth. So, if you can find a spouse that's willing to take over that for you, then you're in good shape.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just wanted to put out there that if any of you all have any questions specifically for Jeff, then to go ahead and put them in the chat. And then I'm going to go over them and we'll see if we can answer some of those questions. One of the questions I want to ask you is more or less about hiding assets, because when you talk about someone that is as wealthy as Jeff Bezos, I know we didn't really touch on this in detail with the last time we spoke. What about hiding the assets?
Well, I think the big problem is, and in my experience, it's more with the woman than with the man, is that many times the wife just doesn't get involved. Either she doesn't care, or she has a career and taking care of the kids and has so many things on her plate that she has no idea what's going on, and just okay, honey, you deal with it, whatever, that kind of thing. In some cases I've seen, the wife pays the bills, but she doesn't get involved with any of the investments. So she doesn't know what's going on with the stock portfolios and if he's buying real estate.
A little bit there. She said she doesn't know what's going on with the investment.
Yeah, that she doesn't know what's going on with the investments, or maybe they have real estate investments and she's really not up to date on what's being bought, how much is being paid for it, where's the money coming from, is there a mortgage on it? So I think the first and most important thing, and my biggest advice, especially for women, is stay involved. I mean, so many times, how much does your husband make? I don't know. Does he get a bonus? No clue. Does he have any stock options? Couldn't tell you. How about any investments, any real estate? I think so, but I'm not sure. So yeah, it's very easy to, get screwed, if you will. If you don't know what you have, how are you going to get your fair share of assets if you don't know what the assets are and where they are? And not only that,
go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
And I even tell my clients, even or not just my clients. I mean, I tell women in general that you need to be involved. You need to know. I mean, forget about divorce. What happens if your husband walks out in the street and gets hit by a bus? Okay.
Right.
And now you're on your own and you have no idea where the bank accounts are, where the, is it TD America? Is it Schwab? Is it Merrill Lynch? Where's your stock portfolio? And now, you've got the trauma of, the death of your spouse, and you got to start trying to figure out where everything is. I mean, the best advice is make sure, what's going on, stay involved. For a lot of people, it's, they'd rather watch, grass grow than, they just find it, totally boring. But the truth of the matter is it's important for a lot of reasons.
It really is. And I was going to say, I think that's one of the things that Mackenzie Bezos did that was very smart. You can tell that she was involved. She knew what was going on. She knew what was going
Right.
on with Amazon.
Oh, now you're breaking up.
A lot of her husband's dealing. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? A little bit
Yeah, I
better?
can.
I
Yeah.
hope so. Okay, perfect. So, she knew what was going on and she was involved. And she knew what was going on as far as like the homes that were being purchased,
Mm-hmm.
the stock options, Amazon. I mean, I think in the end she was left with about 4% stake ownership in Amazon, and
Right.
they came to an amicable agreement where he was going to maintain like 75% of the stock that they co-own together. So yeah, it's very, very important. And someone's asking a question like, how can we initiate conversations to stay involved financially in the financial dealings of the marriage?
Well, it depends what the history is. I mean, if you've been married for 15 years and you never asked a question, then the likely response is, why are you asking me? Or, you were never interested before. I mean, you could say anything. I heard a podcast and, I heard how important it is that, God forbid something happens to you. I don't want to, all of a sudden have to try to figure out, how I'm going to pay the mortgage or whatever, because I don't know where our bank accounts are or whatever. I think you've got to come up with a logical reason. I think the thing to do is do it from the very beginning. I mean, even, not necessarily while you're dating. You're not going out on a first date and ask how much money
Right.
do you have in the bank or
Right.
whatever. But if you're getting engaged, and I've often said it, I said, people are more inclined to talk about their sexual preferences than about money. So,
Yes, that's so true.
yeah, so I think if you're getting engaged, because you want to find out, before you get married, do you have a lot of debt? You need to know, when you're dating and you get to that point, you want to be compatible in a lot of ways. So you've got to also be compatible financially, because otherwise that will put a stress on the marriage. If one is a saver and very frugal and the other person's a spendthrift and, the money's burning a hole in his or her pocket, you're going to have issues. You better find that out, before you get married, and the time to probably sit down is when you start talking about marriage, and you're getting to that point where you're engaged or going to be engaged,
Right.
and talk about that stuff, so you don't have any unpleasant surprises afterwards. And I've had women, it's like, I had no idea. Well, you should have discussed it. Those are important things. Let's talk about it. Do you have credit card debt? Do you have student debt? How much? Do you own your car? Are you leasing your car? Do you have a loan on the car? Because ultimately, you get married and, all of a sudden, whatever the bills are, it's being paid by the household. Let's put it that way, whether both people are
Right.
working or not. It's still, coming out of that common pot. So I think that's a conversation to have before you marry, preferably. If you didn't, then, as soon as possible afterwards. And there's always stuff. You're going to buy a new sofa. Okay, can we afford to spend that now? Do we need to? What's our financial situation? Or, before you lease a car or buy a car or, a house or move or whatever, that's the time to sit down and say, okay, let's see where we're at financially. What do we have in the bank? What do we have in investments?
Right. Right.
What's your take home pay? What are our expenses? How much are we spending each month? I got to tell you, I mean, that's one of the things I do for my clients. I go through all of their expenses. I mean, every credit card, every charge. I mean, first of all, you have to do it because you have to have a financial affidavit if you're filing for divorce, where basically you've got to show in detail your income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. And when you go through what people are actually spending, sometimes they're flawed. They had absolutely no idea they were
Wow.
spending that much. I mean, I had one woman, I mean, they were, multimillionaires. She was spending 20 grand a month on clothing.
What?
Yeah, that's $250,000 a year. I said, "Are you kidding me?"
Quarter.
She had no idea. She put a couple of thousand on one credit card and a few thousand on another credit card, and she literally had no idea. She was floored. She said, "No, you did the numbers wrong." I said, "Nope."
Wow, that is amazing. I think, I said this in one of my previous videos recently, is that I think what happens is that a lot of people get scared to have these types of conversations because they are afraid they may disqualify someone from being in their life if they get an answer that they don't like. And so rather than ask those tough questions, like the ones that you just mentioned, they just prefer to, move on in, the bliss of chemical love.
Well,
All
yeah,
those beautiful chemicals.
you're right. I mean, it's not a pleasant conversation. You sort of, throwing a little cold water on stuff. But isn't it better to find out there's a problem before or afterwards? It's the same thing. If you're dating and every time you go out on your date is getting drunk and blitzed, all the time. Isn't that going to raise a red flag and say, maybe I'm dealing with an alcoholic? Should I really be marrying this person? What's the story here? Is this something you do all the time, or whatever? You just had an exceptionally bad day, and it's a rare occurrence, or whatever. I think you need to know this, and once you're married, it becomes much more difficult to unwind a relationship, because now marriage is not just about love and romance and all the happy stuff. It's also a legal contract, and you're
Absolutely.
financially now bound to each other. It's a lot easier if you're just dating or even engaged to say, no, this is not for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to jump into your next project because you told me a little bit about it, and I was so intrigued, and I honestly felt like that is so brilliant. And
Thank
so
you.
this is called your latest project is called Next Act Properties. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So what I found in many cases that I work on, that there's always the issue of the marital home. For many people, it's their largest or almost largest asset. And there's always the question of what happens with the house. Can one person stay there? I mean, obviously, couples getting divorced, somebody's moving out. So the question is, who gets to keep the house? Sometimes neither one want to keep the house. It's either too expensive or the too many bad memories or whatever. But in many cases, one spouse, typically the woman, and typically, with their children, would like to stay in the house, for a certain period of time, but they can't always do that. In order to do that, one, the spouse that's not living in the house, he wants his or her wants their share of whatever equity they're entitled to. So that means that
Right.
the spouse that's staying has to buy the other spouse out. The other thing is that other spouse that's not living there is going to want their name off of the mortgage, because unlike the Bezoses, most people can't afford to have several houses, and the spouse that's leaving may want to buy another house or a condo or whatever. And if he has or she has an obligation on an existing house, the marital home, they may not be qualified to do that, which means that the spouse that wants to remain in the house has to refinance the mortgage.
Right.
she or he may not have enough income or may have lousy credit score or
Right.
whatever. And in that case, the only alternative would be to sell the house. So what my new company, Next Act Properties, is planning to do, and we're in the process of raising money from investors to do this, is essentially we would buy the house from the married couple and then rent it back to the spouse that wants to remain in the house for a period of whatever, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it is. So sort of get their cake and eat it too, if you will.
Right.
They get their equity out of the house. The spouse that wants to stay in the house stays in the house. The mortgage is paid off because my company, obviously buying the house, would pay off the mortgage. The
Right.
spouse that's leaving, they got their share. They're no longer on the hook for the mortgage, and everybody lives happily ever after. So that's in essence, that's my idea. And in those cases where, for whatever reason, that doesn't work, my company also has a real estate subsidiary where through our network of real estate brokers that are experienced in divorce, we would help that party sell their house if that's the only choice left to do.
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. That will save a lot of time and drama for a lot of couples.
Oh yeah, and
And
save a lot of money, because if you can stay in the house, even though it's still as a tenant, you don't have the moving expense. If you have kids, I mean, it's bad enough the kids are going through the trauma of, their parents divorcing. Last thing you want to have to do is take them away from their friends or pull them out of that school. So this way, you get to remain in the house for pretty much as long as you want to. And now you're a tenant. You don't have to worry about, if the roof leaks or whatever. That becomes my
right,
problem, not yours.
right, right. I didn't think about that. That's very true. That's
Yeah,
very true. I
you
have a
know, you,
question that I have
yeah,
to
go
ask,
ahead.
and that is, have you seen an increase in divorces due to COVID now?
Quite the opposite.
Really?
Quite the opposite. I
Tell
mean,
me.
to be perfectly, I had this conversation the other day. Since COVID happened, my business has been essentially dead. I mean, on one hand, it's a good thing because I've been able to devote my time to my new business. And
Okay.
by the way, for people that are interested, the website is nextactproperties.com. For people that want more information about that. And then there was an article that I read in Bloomberg. In fact, I think I have it on my phone. And let me see if I could find it. And I'll read it to you because it was fascinating to me too. Oh, right here. The number of Americans getting divorced plummeted last year, while the marriage rate also dropped precipitously as thousands of weddings were postponed or canceled, according to a new study. And I think there are a lot of reasons. People were
Right.
stuck living together. Some people lost their jobs, and all of a sudden their income went down, and they couldn't afford now to have two households instead of one.
Right.
I think the courts were closed in most
Right.
places. I think there's pent up demand. So I'm expecting and hoping that starting this month, which is January is always known as divorce month, that, the pent up demand is there. And certainly over the next few months, as the vaccinations roll out, in that case, that pent up demand would happen. Don't get me wrong. I'm not hoping, for unhappiness.
I have to ask you
Yeah.
really
I don't want to say, yay,
okay.
everybody's going to get divorced, but
Right.
yeah, that's,
I have to ask the question, why is January the divorce month? Like, I have to know that. Somebody else wants to know that. Like, why is January known as divorce month?
there's a good reason. Most people
Okay.
do not want to pull the trigger between Thanksgiving and New Year's because, and especially if
Okay.
they're children, the last thing you want is for your kids to remember Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating there. Oh yeah, that's when my parents got divorced.
So it's
So
just like new year, new you. Like, I'm at
Well, yeah, pretty much so. And also the end of August, September is a busy month because now, the kids are back in school and whatever. And people don't want to pull the trigger when, the kids are home during the summer. They just don't want to have that extra, trauma around the kids. Now, that's not to say there's no divorces that happen during the summer or in November or December, but in general, most people will wait until after the new year to pull the trigger. That doesn't mean they haven't been doing their research or whatever, and getting their ducks in a row, and maybe getting all their financial statements together in preparation. But for the most part, they wait until after January 1 to pull the trigger.
Wow, that is very interesting. I had
and very
no
logical
idea
if you think about it
at
too,
all.
right?
No, it is. It's very local. I totally get why they would do that. It's just, I had no idea. Like, why would they wait until January? Like, why would there be influx forces in January? But that makes sense. They want their kids to have, or the family to have like a relatively drama-free holiday, and then kind of wait and then do that. That's
right.
wow.
I mean, what do you
Very
say to
interesting.
the family, as everybody's gathered for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever, you have the family coming over. Is that when you really want to make the big announcement you're getting divorced?
Right, exactly.
Talk about being, a Grinch, so.
Right, exactly. You try to be, I guess, as sensitive as you can be under those circumstances. I want to, before we close and kind of wrap up the conversation, I want to talk a little bit about your book, A Woman's Guide to Financial Security After the Divorce, and kind of tying in, the Bezos situation with MacKenzie Bezos. Like, now she's divorced. She has her divorce settlement. I'm sure she's trying to move on with her life. I know one of the women, when we even had this conversation in our private, one of the private groups that I'm a part of, was talking about, oh, well, who is she going to marry now? I was like, that's kind of irrelevant right now because she's divorced. She might not even want to get remarried right now or even think about that. But as far as providing some kind of security, if MacKenzie Bezos was your client or you had another client, what would you suggest the steps that women who are, now six, 7, 8 figures, or have 6, 7, 8 figure incomes do after their settlement? What do you suggest?
Well, I mean, it's certainly different. I mean, if you're talking about, wealthy women, and not even MacKenzie, I mean, you're talking about somebody that walks with with a settlement of millions or tens of millions of dollars. Number one, be careful about gold diggers. People know that you're single and you got a gorgeous house and you're driving $100,000 car or whatever. At least from what my female friends tell me, there are a lot of people on the dating sites that aren't exactly who they say they are. So I think just from a dating standpoint, just be careful. I mean, I tell my female friends and clients, make sure you Google the guy, before you go out with him. Make sure you're not dealing with someone that just got out of jail, for armed robbery or abuse or whatever. But even for wealthy women, maybe not for MacKenzie, because as we said before, she's got enough money to last many, many, many lifetimes. But even women that walk away with millions of dollars, I think sort of establishing a budget. Now this also depends on what their age is, how much they have, what their expenses are. whether they have income coming in or not. But I have many clients that are in, their 50s or 60s, and maybe never worked or haven't worked in many years. So their settlement is all they're getting. That's it. If they blow through that, they're broke. And you're not going to start working at 80 years old. So when I do my analyses, I assume now people live to 100. And people do. I mean, my ex-mother-in-law is going to be 97 years old, and has COVID. So, and she's beating COVID. I mean, she's a tough one. But but yeah, I mean, 97, and she's going to be fine. She's like at, almost fully recovered. But my point is, I make the assumption people live to 100. So, if you're divorced and, you're 60 years old, maybe you got another 40 years ahead of you. So even if you walked away with, $20 million, if you're spending $1 million a year, okay, and I could, change that to whatever, you walk away with, $1 million and you're spending $100,000 a year, 10 years, more or less, you're going to be broke.
Right.
What are you going to do after that? Eat cat food? I mean, so, I mean, the good thing is when people go through the process of divorce, as I explained earlier, you have to fill out a financial affidavit, including all of your expenses, which, as I said, a lot of people had no clue they were spending that much, or, on all the different things where money goes every month. So you've already have the basis for formulating a budget. And one of the things that I do when I analyze different settlements for clients, which is better, settlement A, B, or C, I project it out to living to 100. I put in what their current expenses are. I put in a rate of inflation, how those expenses may increase. Sometimes I eliminate expenses, that may no longer be there. I mean, maybe if somebody's, 90 years old, maybe, their gymnastic, training is no longer applicable, or, maybe they're no longer driving at that point. And, you make a different expense, for, how many Ubers you're going to need, or, instead of, paying for your car or whatever. So you take all those things into account, and then, their settlement, and you assume that they're going to get a certain rate of return on their investments. And basically what I do, the way I analyze it, the bottom line is, at what age do you run out of money? So if scenario number one, you run out of money at 75, scenario number two, you run out of money at 85, and scenario number three, you never run out of money even at age 100, then we know which one's the better settlement. And sometimes it's very difficult to tell because there's different mixtures of assets. There's alimony, how much, for how long. So you could tweak all of those things to make sure that, my client, which, I exclusively work with women on the financial aspects of the divorce. For the, my new business for the house, it's, the divorcing couple. So I'll work with, either party, whoever wants to stay there. But for my regular practice, I exclusively work with women. And it's important that they know which settlement is going to be the best, so they can maximize the settlement so that the money lasts as long as possible. And then sometimes you just have to adjust your expenses. Maybe, you don't get a mani-pedi every week. I mean, there's certain things that you can do to, tamp down what your expenses are. Or maybe you go out and, get a part-time job or start, a business from home. I mean, there are a number of ways. I mean, many ways. The way to make your money last longer is to bring more in and to spend less of it. Right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jeff, I want to really thank you for your time and speaking with me again. I really, really appreciate it. And As always, I have a great time when I speak with you. Always fun. And hopefully we can do it again in the future should a topic arise that is relevant and I need your expertise. I want to
Anytime.
encourage all of you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I want to encourage you ladies to go on Amazon, check out Jeff's books. He has like 6 books that are out, and I really truly feel that they should be a part of your journey of leveling up, of being the best that you can be. I'll leave a link to his books in the description box of the video, but he has volume 1 and 2, Divorce, Think Financially, Not Emotionally. There's Divorce, Financial Planner for Women. There's a guide, a woman's guide to financial security after divorce. And there's the book about why and where divorcing husbands hide assets, and also how to protect yourself, your financial well-being as a stay-at-home mom. All of those books are needed for you to truly up your game and be smart. His last name is Landers, Landers. And again, I will leave the links to his book as well as his new project, Next Act Properties, in the description box. It's nextactproperties.com. Again, thank you so much, Jeff. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon. And I want to thank you all for listening. Ladies, be sure to subscribe to the channel, share this video, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.
Thank you, Candace.
All right, Jeff. All right, Jeff. All right, Jeff. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Very good. Now go to bed. You must be exhausted.
Absolutely.
All right.
I enjoy listening to him.